Hey now, and welcome to the Physical Security Professional channel. My name is Phil Coppola. I'm a board-certified physical security professional by the ASIS Organization and have over 20 years of experience in the physical security world. During that time, I've worked for some of the top brands in the security industry, including Sony, Genetec, and now Quanergy. If you've come here looking for videos specific to Genetec, all of that content is still available on the channel, and I've included links below. I'm restarting this channel with a purpose, and that purpose is to deliver high-quality educational content for security professionals and those interested in learning more about physical security. The reality is there's not a whole lot of resources out there for folks to learn about physical security. Sure, you could join the ASIS organization, which obviously I have. You could join the Security Industry Association or the Electronic Security Association. You could do all kinds of searches and find all kinds of videos about different camera reviews and stuff like that. But the reality is, no one's out there actually teaching you how these things work and why you should actually choose the devices that you need for your organization to thrive. Look, video surveillance cameras are ubiquitous, and you may think you know everything about them, but I would challenge you to say, just based on the sheer number of funny pictures and videos I see on the LinkedIn hashtag CCTV fails, that there's a lot of folks out there that don't know the first thing about installing or even picking a video surveillance camera for their application. So I want to take my knowledge that I've gathered over the last 20 years and democratize it and bring that content to you. Now the reality is there's a whole lot more that goes into a video surveillance system than can probably be shared on YouTube. Just there's lots of information. So if you have any questions, or if you want to schedule a one-on-one conversation, I've left all of my contact information down below. Feel free to reach out to me and we'll schedule some time to chat. So I'm going to break this video down into 3 different parts. In the first part, we're going to talk about what a physical protection system actually is and what it consists of. Then we're going to move on to risk, threats, and vulnerabilities. And finally, we're going to talk about the 4 Ds of physical security. Apologies in advance for the length of time this video is going to take, but all of this information is fundamental, it's foundational. If you can understand this, then picking the right security camera is going to be very easy, and you may even find that maybe you don't need as many cameras as you thought you were going to. What even is a physical protection system, and where do cameras fall into play? A physical protection system consists of architectural elements, operational elements, and physical security devices. There are 3 different types of physical protection system: preventative, corrective, and detective. Now, just from those 3 terms, you should automatically understand that video surveillance cameras fall into the detective category. Why? Because a camera is a detection device. It's meant to detect an adversary as they're approaching your facility, or to see something that shouldn't be happening. It is not meant to prevent something from happening, and it is not meant to correct someone that has started to do something bad. A preventative system is intended to protect an asset and make an attack unsuccessful, whereas a corrective system reduces the effectiveness of an attacker and allows for rapid response. So a camera could sort of fall into the corrective realm. For example, if I had cameras in a facility and somebody broke in and that was detected, I could use that video to deploy a security guard or the police to the facility to apprehend the attacker. But ultimately, it's really meant to be used in a detective system, which discovers attackers and activates countermeasures. That's the point. That's the purpose of a video surveillance camera, as well as many other detection type devices. If we're protecting perimeters, you're looking at fence detection systems, fence vibration systems, LiDAR systems. Quick plug for Quanergy. I'll leave a bunch of information down below if you want to learn more about LiDAR. Or glass break sensors, motion detectors. These are all detective physical protection systems. As I mentioned, these 3 aspects of a physical protection system are intended to work in tandem. You have your architectural elements and your operational elements that are augmented by your physical security devices. Architectural elements could be things like walls, right? The skin of your building. It could be a fence, it could be barbed wire, it could be thorny bushes, could be trees, it could be a fence post with a sign that says, hey, private property, right? These are architectural elements. Operational elements are those that include policy and procedure. Before you let somebody in, are we checking their ID? Do we have clear entry and exit points? Are our emergency exits locked? Do we have man traps or airlocks, turnstiles? These are operational elements that ensure that the flow of people adheres to your physical protection policy. And then, of course, your physical security devices augment both of these by allowing you to detect potential intruders or potential adversaries when they start to do something bad. If you'll allow me, I'll go on a little bit of a rant here, specific to school districts who are protecting like the most precious asset of all. As a father of young children, I can't imagine anything worse than what some families in the United States and other parts of the world have had to go through. But the rush to just buy video surveillance cameras and install them in school districts because they got some funding is like counterintuitive. You can have amazing video of people doing horrible things, or you can have architectural elements and operational elements that are augmented by physical security elements to actually prevent that thing from happening. By having a well-defined procedure for allowing people egress and ingress into your facility. In other words, if I have a clear procedure on how people get into my doors, then I can prevent bad people from coming through my doors. If I lock my doors, then people can't get into those doors. If we're talking about just simple access control, where does video surveillance come into this? This is a policy issue. This is an operational issue. So adding cameras just for adding cameras' sake and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money to basically give you live video and recorded video of people doing bad things is sort of counterintuitive. It doesn't solve anything. Whereas a well-defined policy with operational elements and architectural elements augmented by physical security will actually lead to much better outcomes. The last thing a school district should be purchasing are video surveillance cameras. That may be an unpopular opinion. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I should probably augment that statement and say they should buy video surveillance cameras after they've figured out all of the other elements and pieces to the puzzle. And I would posit that as a physical security professional, you should be doing the same thing. Are your architectural elements up to par? Are your operational elements up to par? If all of those things are corrected, then video surveillance cameras should come right in behind that. And other physical security devices as well. So now that we understand what a physical protection system is, let's talk about and spend some time with probably the most important aspect, which are risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. Before you pick a video surveillance camera or any other physical security device, the first conversation you need to have with yourself and with your team is, what is it that we're actually trying to protect? And what is the risk against that asset? The thing that we're trying to protect is our asset. The risk is any event that could potentially compromise or destroy that asset. Once you have that in mind, then you can start having a conversation about what protective measures you're going to put in place to protect that asset against that risk. And the first thing you need to do after that is identify your vulnerabilities. So if we think about like a really common occurrence these days, which is a catalytic converter theft. Let's say you own a parking lot and people use that parking lot, let's say maybe as a commuter lot, and they may leave their cars overnight. And they leave and somebody comes when the overnight hours are upon us, and they go and they steal the catalytic converters from your property that your customers trusted you with. Well, once that happens, well, we understand what our asset is. We understand what the risk is, right? Our assets are on customers' cars. My risk is the catalytic converter being stolen. Why is it happening? What's the vulnerability? How is this happening? Well, maybe I don't have adequate fencing. Maybe my parking lot is too poorly lit at night, and therefore I'm providing these adversaries with concealment. So it's very easy for them to not have to hop a fence, not have to get through any barbed wire. They're under the cover of darkness, and they can get in and out without any detection. So our vulnerability is the lack of fencing and lack of lighting. And then finally our threat. Well, what's our threat? In this case, it's the adversary that's stealing the catalytic converter. A threat is something that exploits a vulnerability. So my threat is the person that is going to exploit the fact that I don't have a fence and I don't have proper lighting. Now with that application in mind, where do video surveillance cameras come into play? As the security manager for this parking lot, if the first gut reaction is, well, I'll just get cameras. I'll get cameras and I'll put them everywhere. What is that really going to do other than spend a lot of money? Well, I'll have some video potentially of a person stealing catalytic converters. Maybe that video is good enough to get a prosecution, but is that going to stop this from happening in the near term, in the short term? The answer is probably not. And honestly, if the adversary is smart enough to wear a hat and a mask, you're not going to get a prosecution, because if it's at night, the camera's in infrared mode, there's going to be no color. It's going to be very hard to prove your case. Whereas installing a fence with some barbed wire and some adequate lighting may cost almost the same amount of money, but lead to a very different outcome. So those architectural elements are something that we should consider. And then some operational elements. Maybe we need to hire a guard service to do a patrol once in a while, right? Maybe we need to have a clear entry and exit point. Maybe we need to install a lift gate to prevent people from gaining access to the facility. There are lots of different things that we could do from an operational perspective. And then finally, put in some video surveillance cameras, some perimeter detection systems, so that you are alerted when a breach actually happens. Now, there is a concept called a risk, threat, and vulnerability assessment. There's actually 3 different types of assessments. If you have any questions, or if you would like a risk assessment done, let's have a conversation. Again, all of my contact information is below, and I can put you in touch with somebody that can actually do a risk assessment for you. And finally, we land on the 4 Ds of physical security. If you remember nothing else from this video, and I certainly hope you do, I would like you to remember what these 4 Ds stand for. Deter, detect, delay, and deny. Each one of these 4 Ds should be considered when you're putting together a physical protection system. How am I going to deter an adversary or something bad from happening? How would I detect that thing when it does happen? How can I delay the adversary from gaining access to or potentially destroying my assets? And then finally, if I can do it, how do I deny them from doing it? And all of these are part of what's called a layered approach to security, or a defense in depth strategy, where we basically build concentric circles of protection around your assets. So let's run through a couple of scenarios where I will demonstrate a layered approach to security and where video surveillance and other physical protection devices will come into play. And the first place we'll go is my house. So here's my home in New Jersey, and in this scenario we'll use the asset of my passports and my documents that are in my safe. So my safe is the thing that I'm attempting to protect in this scenario. So again, my safe, let's say for the sake of argument, my safe is going to be this green box right here. And let's just say that that's in my basement. Now, I need to protect that safe at all costs. It's got really important documents to me. Well, let's switch over to red here. How am I going to protect that safe? First things first, I have a fence. And that fence is on either side of my property, all the way around back. So I can, and that it's a relatively high fence, and that generally is going to protect those sides. Now I have a big wide open space in the front. I like my home to be inviting, as it were, but there are different methods that I can use and that I've deployed to make people second guess trying to breach my perimeter. So it should be noted that along the sides of the fence here and here are barberry bushes with really thorny branches. So if you're going to try to get through that way, that's like a no-go. Like when my kids' balls go over to my neighbor's yard, I will actually walk all the way around, because you don't want to go through those barberry bushes. They hurt. We'll get back to those barberry bushes in a second. But the other thing that I have deployed are really bright spotlights on either side of my driveway, at my front door, and in the backyard. And these spotlights are obviously motion activated. Well, the ones on the front of the house are on all night. The ones in the back are motion activated. I've also got a lamppost here that is also very bright. So my house is lit up like Times Square at night, much to my neighbor's chagrin. In fact, my mailbox actually has a light on it as well. I don't want to provide a potential adversary with concealment, with the ability to be camouflaged against any one of my neighbors potentially seeing them doing something bad. In addition to those architectural elements, I've also got barberry bushes here, which are right in front of a window, and barberry bushes here, which are also right in front of a window. I've got a closure to my fence here and a closure to my fence here. And we'll switch colors to yellow, and we'll talk about my electronic security devices. So I've got my architectural elements. I've got my operational elements, and part of that is my lights that come on at night, my doors that are always locked, my garage doors, which are smart, so I can get an alert when they're opened and get a alert or a notification when they're closed, so I can ensure all that's going on. I can talk to my home assistant and say, activate my alarm system, and all those things will happen, or I actually have it set on a schedule. So when I'm not home, I know my alarm system is activated during a certain time of day. In addition to those operational procedures, then I have my physical protection devices. So I've got alarm points on my garage doors, on my front door, on all of my glass windows that are all around my house. Each one has a door contact, as well as glass break detectors that are spread out sporadically throughout my home. In addition to that, I've got some motion detectors in my garage and in my kitchen and in my living room. So I'll know if even somebody happens to get through the lights and the barberry bushes and breaks my window, and for some reason my alarm system still hasn't gone off, the motion detectors will pick them up. And then finally, switch to green here, I've got video surveillance cameras. So I've got a camera here, I've got a camera here, I've got a camera here, and I've got a camera back here. I also have a camera inside the garage, so that if somebody does break into my garage, they'll be seen. And that camera actually has white light LEDs that turn on upon motion. So even that is just another operational element, so that if somebody does breach, or let's say for some crazy instance, I actually left my garage door open and somebody walked in, well, that motion will activate not just the motion detector and have the whole alarm system go off, but it will also activate those white lights and maybe will get that person to run away. So when we think about layered security, the first layer is this fence. The second layer is potentially the barberry bushes here and all the lighting that's out front of my house. The next layer are my physical security devices, right? All the alarm points that are sporadically located throughout my home. Another layer is my video surveillance cameras that are going to detect when people are getting a little too close during certain times of day. And then finally, another operational and architectural element, my safe is in my basement. My basement floor is concrete and my safe is bolted to it. So it's going to take a long time for that adversary to get down to my basement, find it, because it's a mess down here, find it, pry it off the floor, or try to break into it, all while the alarm system is going off. The video surveillance cameras have detected them. They're potentially exposed in that way, and the police are probably on their way if I'm not home and I'm running to the basement at that point. So we've created these concentric circles of security all the way around my asset. And that's what I mean by layered security. So in the instance that we're talking about specifically today, which is what's the point of a video surveillance camera? Here, to protect this particular asset, to protect these documents, video surveillance is a piece of it, but it's honestly the least important piece. The most important piece is deterrence. I don't want that hassle. Detection. So if that hassle is going to happen, I want it detected and I want to know about it. And then finally, delaying and denying that adversary. a camera is not going to really help me with any of that, unfortunately. Now, it can potentially provide some deterrent factor. It can help me if the person does break into my house or into your facility. It may help you with prosecution, but do we even want to get to that point? Right? Prosecution is expensive. Let's call it what it is. So if we take this layered approach to security and we make security cameras part of the layer approach, maybe make it a layer, but it's probably not the most important layer. So let's look at another example. We'll call back to that catalytic converter issue that we were talking about earlier. And let's look at an actual parking lot. So this parking lot is at a train station near my house. So this train station is near to me. It's actually pretty well lit. They do have some video surveillance cameras out there, and they do have good operational security in that they have a guard service that comes around fairly often, probably not as often as I would like. But as you can see, this parking lot is absolutely massive. Pre-COVID, this parking lot, this entire parking area would be packed with cars. This building here is another huge parking structure. This parking deck would be packed during the day, and you'd be forced into a satellite lot like over here, or this like dirt lot over here. Now let's talk about this dirt lot in particular. So this lot is way off to the side, right? There's tons of lighting in this area, but over here, not so much. You've got a lot of concealment that these trees provide. And if you had cars parked in this lot and it was nighttime, there's really no fence here to speak of. So it'd be very easy for somebody to just kind of sneak through the trees, and right, they can get in from this street here. They could park their car over here, come across the tracks. Yes, people do walk across the tracks. Please don't do that. But they could walk across the tracks, come through these trees, be perfectly concealed, and you know, any car parked along this line could potentially have their catalytic converter stolen. Lots of inadequate lighting here. I guess that's an oxymoron. So no lack of adequate lighting here, lack of video surveillance. You know, the guard tours don't necessarily go through here as often. And this lot actually used to get quite full, again, pre-COVID days. So what could we do to protect this parking lot now that we understand all the different aspects of a physical protection system, risks, threats, and vulnerabilities, and the 4 Ds of security? Well, first thing is we could put up a fence along here. I think that would probably be the easiest thing to do, you know, along here and along here, to prevent people from gaining access. And we could actually push that a little bit further, maybe put some barbed wire along the fence. You know, not the prettiest thing in the world, but I guarantee you people aren't going to be jumping over this fence anytime soon. In addition to that, we could deploy adequate lighting, potentially in these areas. Oops, let's switch it to blue. In these areas where you have the most concealment. And, you know, maybe a light pole here and a light pole here. They give you, you know, adequate lighting coverage. So now this area is well lit. So I've got a fence with barbed wire. I've got really good lighting. So now if I'm a criminal looking for a catalytic converter, I'm going to say, all right, I've got to cut through this fence, or I have to potentially jump over and potentially hurt myself either from the barbed wire or from falling, you know, and landing the wrong way. And then even with that, I've got all this lighting that I have to deal with. And then after I've stolen the thing, I've got to get back over the fence. So that's a hassle. You could also deploy fence detection systems, perimeter detection systems along the fence to be alerted when an adversary is attempting to breach your fence. If you're interested to learn more, again, about Quanergy LiDAR, you could put LiDAR sensors out there that'll actually tell you when an object is getting too close to your fence line, and then activate countermeasures accordingly. And of course, if you do that, and you can detect someone before they get to your perimeter, or potentially as they're getting through your perimeter, you can alert your guard service, your operational procedures to kick in and potentially stop the adversary from doing what they were going to be doing. Now, finally, you could start putting in cameras, right? Put some cameras here and over here and over here, right? And all around to get you decent coverage. But ultimately, again, the camera's only going to be potentially a detection device if you have somebody that's there watching the cameras all the time. We'll do a future video on why that doesn't work and why fewer and fewer organizations are actually deploying cameras with human live operators, because humans are just terrible at detection. But you could do that. Or, again, you could put up a camera in the hopes that it'll act as a deterrent, potentially, or help you with prosecution after the fact. But again, here, a fence and adequate lighting with some barbed wire is probably the most effective way to prevent your assets from their threats, and it will fix the vulnerability against that risk. So if you've stuck with me this far, thank you. Congratulations. You're one step closer to understanding the full scope of physical protection systems and where these devices actually fall into the mix. I hope that I've sparked your curiosity and that you'd be interested in learning more about physical security and video surveillance cameras as we move forward in this series. Again, if you have any questions, if you want to talk to me one-on-one so that I can learn a little bit more about your application and help and steer you towards protecting your assets, leave me a comment down below or shoot me an email. All my contact information is listed right down here. Again, my name is Phil Coppola. I'm a physical security professional with over 20 years of experience in the security industry. If you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe to receive notifications when new videos are posted, and we'll see you on the next one.